With Jeanette Trumpeter tonight, who's there live to give us a look at what's happening right now and where a press conference just wrapped up a bit ago, we understand. Jeanette?
Yeah, we found out a little more information, Dan, within the last half hour or so. But as you can see, the tide has come up a lot since I spoke to you at 5 and 6 o'clock when I was walking around in the crude that was kind of layering over the sand. Now it's just sort of floating around in the surf. You also saw earlier how they had put up booms to try to contain the oil that had drifted off the coast from this pipeline break. Plains American Pipeline, a 24-inch pipeline burst, spilling about 2,000 barrels of oil a minute. And so they have not given us a firm estimate. Earlier we heard 21,000 gallons, but we don't think that's accurate anymore. They really don't have a sense of how big this thing is. What they're trying to do is get some sense of how they're going to contain this, because when you saw those booms off the coast earlier today, they had to pull those in because of the winds and the tide. So now it's nightfall. They're trying to come up with a plan on how they'll battle this thing tomorrow, but they do have to wait until the sun comes up.
Tomorrow, we plan to do a first light overflight with a helicopter to determine if the oil has moved. There are wind projections that say that the oil could move 2 to 4 miles south down the coast.
Now, so far, they have not heard of any wildlife washing up on shore or being damaged by this crude, but they're certainly concerned about it. They're asking if you find any to not pick it up, obviously, but call the proper authorities. We'll put some numbers up on ksby.com of where you can call. Also, a lot of people wanting to volunteer with the cleanup. They say right now they just don't need that, but they are putting up a website where you can sign up and volunteer to come help with the cleanup efforts. And again, kind of not much happening tonight. They have to wait until tomorrow morning to come up with what's next. Rayanne Christensen will update you a little bit later on the history of this company and how this break may have happened. They do not have a cause at this point, not one that they're saying at least, Dan.
Yeah.
So a lot of unanswered questions.
Jeanette, we saw earlier that there were some whales that were migrating just past the booms that they were beginning to put down in the water. Did you happen to see those whales again after that? Do we have any idea? Were they able to get out of that area okay?
No, and in fact, I asked that specific question at the press conference because we watched those whales for a good 20 minutes or so, and they say that they have not seen them, and as far as they know, they moved on. They were just outside the spill, so there is the chance that they are fine and moved on. Obviously a concern, and you know, they have all kinds of agencies in town, the Department of Fish and Game, a lot of wildlife services coming in to help with this, and as they explained to us, this is not something that you do quickly. Lots of different agencies handling different aspects of this spill, but there is a murkiness to this water tonight. Still, you can smell the crude oil, and we're told it'll be a matter of days, possibly weeks, before this place looks like it did prior to about 2 o'clock this afternoon.
Yeah, well, and that sounds like that may even be an optimistic assessment of the whole thing. All right, Jeanette, well, hang tight. We're going to check in with you here shortly, but we want to change gears right now and heading further. Jeanette Trumpeter is live on the scene there, and she joins us now. Jeanette, we were talking about this press conference just a bit ago. It sounded like they were already concerned about this oil spill continuing to migrate.
Yeah, because they had to take the booms out earlier today that were hoping to contain this. The tide is rolling in, as you can see, and look what it's bringing with us, Dan, or with it. I want to be careful here because it's slippery, but every rock that you pick up here, this kind of a heavy one, has daubs of that thick crude on it. So with the tide comes more crude coming inland. This pipe broke sometime this morning or early afternoon, and they didn't even discover the rupture until it had reached a culvert and into the Pacific, and somebody noticed it was coming down on the beach. Now the question is, what caused it? How do you contain it? And how much damage has been done? So far, they say they haven't found any evidence of damaged marine life. However, they're pretty certain that there has to be some, and what they do want people to know is don't try to handle it yourself. They're just going to have to wait and see how bad the situation is.
We recommend that folks do not pick up these animals, any animals that they see, whether they be marine mammals or marine seabirds. These are wild animals and they can hurt you even though you're trying to take care of them. The best thing to do is be a good witness, notify us of the location and site of where you've seen this animal, and we'll get some response crews that are trained to help that animal out.
So what we have is a mess on our hands. This beach usually would be very popular as a destination for vacation travelers as we head into the Memorial Day weekend, but not today, and probably not in time for the weekend. They would not commit whether this campground and this beach will remain closed that long, but they basically told people you probably should be making alternate plans now. So people who had reservations here, they will be getting calls. They are trying to send them to El Capitan and Gaviota and other beaches, Goleta Beach, excuse me. So they're trying to make other plans for all the people who had planned their vacations here this weekend, but they just have no time estimate on how long this cleanup will take, Dan.
All right, thank you, Jeanette. A lot to talk about here, too. And Dave, and we begin tonight with Jeanette Trumpeter, who is there live to give us a look firsthand at what's happening right now. And Jeanette, a press conference that wrapped up a bit ago gave us a bit more information. What did we get out of that?
Well, we got that they don't know for sure how big this spill is, Dan. They know that it is what they would call a medium spill. Believe it or not, they have small, medium, and large spills is how they classify them. And medium is what they, as far as they will go on how big this spill is. Now, we do know it came from a 24-inch pipeline inland that was taking raw crude to either a refinery north or south of us, and that it burst sometime early this afternoon or possibly late this morning, and no one discovered it until the oil reached the Pacific. So we don't know how long this crude was spilling from it, but we do know it carried about 200 barrels an hour. So those original estimates of about 21,000 gallons may not be far off. We also know it is not contained tonight. They did put out some booms earlier today to try to contain the oil that had made it to the Pacific and was spreading, but they had to remove those because of currents and because of wind. And so they will take a look at where they approach this thing from when the sun comes up tomorrow.
Tomorrow we plan to do a first light overflight with a helicopter to determine if the oil has moved. There are wind projections that say that the oil could move 2 to 4 miles south down the coast.
So that is where we stand tonight. There is an army here assembled to try and attack this thing, but it's a very moving target is what we've been told. When you're dealing with an oil spill, you're dealing with so many factors: the tides, the winds, the weather, and then of course daylight and darkness. And right now they're kind of limited on what they can do, but they're ready to go tomorrow morning. I know there will be some cleanup happening today, but all that crude that we saw in the waves earlier today, Dan, when the tide was out, is now moving on shore. I'm going to see if I can just walk over to where the waves have come up and see. You don't have to look far. You grab any rock. Oh boy, and I just got myself nice and dirty. But look at what we're finding here washing up on shore, little globs of crude everywhere. So the cleanup now will be the beach, and we're talking days, it could be weeks, they say, before this thing is back to normal, but they say it will recover. Of course, we have the marine mammals to think about, the animals, and then people. The smell here was kind of awful this afternoon. Since the breeze has come in, it's subsided some, or maybe I'm just getting used to it, I don't know. But there's a whole attack on that. We'll have more throughout this newscast, Dan.
Okay, and Jeanette, we were listening into some of that press conference a little earlier. It sounded like, number one, they had backed off on any estimate of exactly how much oil had gone into the water. Originally, they were saying about 21,000 gallons. Then it sounded like the Coast Guard had just said, at this point, we really don't know. But they're saying a minimum of a medium-sized spill at that point. At this point, is that right?
Yeah, you know, I think there was as you can see, there's a lot of media here, and the folks that were talking during this media conference had to face a lot of questions, you know, just firing out at them, and they just wouldn't commit to any kind of quantitative size of this spill at this point. But she said, believe it or not, we would qualify this as a medium spill. There are smalls, there are larges. we're right in the middle on this one.
All right, and again, it sounded like they were only able to confirm that they had so far retrieved about 20 gallons of oil from the water. So this is early days, but hopefully we'll be making more progress. Okay, well, Jeanette, hang tight if you would, please. We'll be checking back with you in here in just a few minutes. Just wrapped up here a little bit ago. Jeanette, wanted to ask you about something that we saw a little bit earlier in one of your live shots. There were some whales just offshore, and you had mentioned that you guys were kind of watching them to see how they were reacting. Were you able to tell, did they seem to move away, or were they just kind of hanging out watching all the activity, or what was going on?
You know, I think they were just passing through as they do, you know, up the coast, and it didn't seem like they were in any distress. It was a typical, you know, breaching and coming down, and there were boats around there, especially one that seemed to kind of be going inside of the whale, between the whale and the spill, and it seemed to me like the boat was trying to keep the whale away from the spill. But I asked at the press conference earlier today, and they say that they didn't have any information on that, and as far as they know, no mammals have been, or they haven't seen any visible evidence of any mammals or sea life being injured by this spill. But they're not thinking that that isn't going to happen. This is a large spill, or a medium spill as we've been told, but there's a lot of crude out there. So they are expecting, you know, to find some animals, and they're bringing in crews that are trained specifically to deal with the rescue of these animals. And they do say it's the job for the professionals as much as you may want to help out.
We recommend that folks do not pick up these animals, any animals that they see, whether they be marine mammals or marine seabirds. These are wild animals, and they can hurt you even though you're trying to take care of them. The best thing to do is be a good witness, notify us of the location and site of where you've seen this animal, and we'll get some response crews that are trained to help that animal out.
Now, one of the things we want to point out, this oil, while it may have originated from the platforms, has been already delivered to an inland facility where the oil is kind of separated. The gas, the water, the sediment taken away, and the pure crude is then pipelined to refineries either north or south. And the pipeline that was carrying this crude was taking this raw crude, so to speak, to the refineries. And that's where the pipe broke and spilled for several hours before it was contained. And it really wasn't discovered, Dan, as we've mentioned before, until it reached the ocean and people spotted it, but they were able to turn it off. But we're talking a 24-inch pipeline with about 200 barrels of oil spilling through it. So there's some spillage out there, and there's a mess. Now, what's happening here tonight is a lot of prep work, really. If we can walk over here, you're just seeing crews arrive. We have Clean Seas, we have Patriot Services, which kind of deals with oil spills. Plain American Pipeline contracts out the cleanup for these kind of spills. So they're bringing in the porta potties, they're bringing in the lights, they're bringing in the support crew for these people that will be doing it. And we're told they will begin at 7 a.m. the cleanup process. So not a lot happening here tonight except a lot of staging and then watching the weather, watching the tides, watching what happens. And you'll see the wildlife department and all kinds of agencies coming together to try to coordinate this effort. And just watching all these agencies come together, you know what coordination can be like between multiple agencies.
Oh, absolutely.
So
it can be tough.
they have plenty to do tonight.
Jeanette, you're in that staging area. Is that the campground area that was evacuated earlier? Is that where you are right now?
Yeah, we are, and there's no campers. Well, we're actually we get confused here whether it's east or west. I would call it north of the main campground, but the beach area. So that's kind of the staging area where all the actual campsites I would call a little further south. Some would say a little further west because of the way this beach is facing. But there's no kind of camping activity or social activity happening here tonight.
Yeah, we're showing
Just prep
video from
for
earlier today when the campers were all being told basically to pack up and get out because of the spill. So, okay, well, Jeanette, I really appreciate the information. Tell you what, we're going to shift gears here a little bit and talk about the drift of the oil and
I'm live at Refugio State Beach, where things are actually pretty quiet today after a big day here with the oil spill. What we have is a lot of oil on the beach. You pick up any rock around here where the water has come in, and it's dotted with oil. Some have a lot more. I don't know if photographer Kenny Nichols can pan over and see, but right about there you see the rocks with lots of oil. The waves are bringing it in as the tide comes in. But right now, the cleanup efforts are at a standstill. They are in a grouping mode. They are trying to coordinate how this thing will be attacked tomorrow. And they will begin at daylight to assess the damage, come up with a plan, and that will depend on the tides, on the winds, on the weather. But nothing happening tonight but coordination efforts. So right now, any crew that has made it to the Pacific is drifting and heading offshore or coming back in with the tide. So a lot of cleanup. This will be a crazy place again tomorrow morning as soon as that sun comes up, Dan.
All right, Jeanette, thank you so much. Matt's up next with sports. We're going to take a quick break. Jeanette Trumpeter is live in the area, and she can give us a little more information about this. Jeanette, what do you see right now from where you're standing?
Well, a lot of oil just along the shoreline, Dan. Let me take a walk down here, and you can see. I won't get too thick into it, but I'd say an inch or two of thick crude right here that has come down and kind of spread on these beaches. And I don't know how much you can see from the camera, but if you look out, you can see some of the containment vessels out there. Halfway between us and the containment vessel is where we see the end of the visible oil spill, but that doesn't mean there is not more oil right below that. We are seeing some mammals, even saw a whale just beyond where the oil is, and this is it's pretty thick. I mean, you can see it, and the thing that you get immediately when you come here, Dan, is the stench and the smell. However, there are still people up in the Gaviota campground who are enjoying the day and not letting this stop their plans. That will change, though, because we've just been informed by CAL FIRE that they will be evacuating that area. Now, I want to bring Lily Tan. We have full team coverage for you here to explain where this oil is coming from. Obviously originally off on the platforms, but it's made a little journey before it broke onshore earlier today. Lily?
Thank you, Jeanette. Well, the oil, what it does is it comes from those offshore rigs that you see way out in the distance, and it comes through onto the beach through a pipe separated already.
Now these pipelines go through weekly inspections, flyover inspections where there's any sign of any spill. We don't know if it is one of those inspections that led to the call today or the fact that the oil had been leaking for a while and made it all the way to the coastline. But let me show you. I want to see if I can get our photographer Jason Orr to pan in on this. Somebody just abandoned their tennis shoes here on the beach today, clearly walked out and saw what was there, and that is just thick, gooey crude in the Pacific now. We have heard that from the crews out on the boats that maybe this containment will be fairly quick in the fact that it hasn't spread too far out in the Pacific, but they do have a job. They'll be out there throughout the night trying to get the containment and make sure that the damage is as minimal as possible. Of course, a lot of that depends on the currents and the winds and what's happening with the weather. So, Dan, I want to get back to you in the studio and see if we can get some insight from Chief Meteorologist Dave Hovde.
Okay, and Jeanette, real quickly, I just wanted to ask you, we've been hearing reports that this is now covering an area about 4 miles wide. From where you're standing, can you see an end of this? Can you see where this has spread to?
No, I can't see as far as north and south how far down the beach the crude is, but when we are finished with you at 5:30, we'll take a walk both directions, and we have other crews here. I can tell you, about where you're seeing that blue boat is as far as I'm seeing any discoloration in the water. I think the 4 miles might be a bit big, and we just talked, they're having a command post up the hill with all the agencies that are involved in this, which I would assume include the state parks and the oil companies and the Coast Guard, and they're trying to get some sense of what the extent of the spill is. And frankly, right now, Dan, they say they don't know. So they're looking into it. We'll look into it. We'll hopefully have more information for you throughout this newscast. All
right, Jeanette, thank you so much for that. And we are going to check in right now with Dave. Excuse me. Actually, let's go to Jeanette first and check in. Jeanette, what do you have for us?
Well, the one thing that that's coming to mind as I listen to that interview, Dan, is the kind of response that will be necessary. And, you know, we're down here on the beach, and I'm going to go ahead and wait. I put on my rain boots to see how thick the stuff. There is no sort of cleanup happening here yet. They're kind of trying to contain it from going, whoa, this is slippery, sticky. So not that deep, but I don't know how close you can get in on this, Jason, but sticky, thick crude, but not even an inch deep at this point. But this is sort of unusual in spills that we've seen before, at least here on the Pacific coast that I've been part of. It's always coming from the ocean, so this is kind of interesting that it's washing out to shore, so the tide's definitely playing a part here. If you look out into the waves, you can actually see the oil in the waves. And then, Jason, I don't know if you can pan out to that blue boat out there, but that's where we're seeing one of our either gray whales or humpbacks kind of frolicking around them just on the edge of the oil line here today. Charlie Misra, you were one of the first of our crew to get down here today, and I suppose you had the same reaction we did. The first thing you noticed was the smell.
That's exactly right, Jeanette. We were here a couple of hours ago, just about 2 miles down the road, and really what the first thing we noticed was that pungent smell, the strong smell, and we didn't even have the windows down, and we could still, with the wind and everything, we could smell it from the first thing right when we got here. And I'm sure you've been able to tell as we've been down here, it's been close to unbearable at times, and it can give you a bit of a headache if you're smelling it too much or for too long.
It's just like kind of being at the gas station when you get that big whiff as you're filling up your tank. And you were saying that you smelled it, miles away.
That's right. We were 2 miles down the road. Right now we're just south of the 101, and we were just 2 miles down the road when you see the first Refugio State Beach sign, and we could smell it. It was very strong even then, and it's only gotten stronger, as you can imagine, right here, right next to it all.
And like I said, we're standing here, no sort of cleanup efforts happening here now. I think what most of the majority of the focus is right now is A, figuring how big this spill is, and B, stopping any more from going out into the Pacific. But this beach is empty. However, we're talking about the smell and the damage that we're seeing. There are people still in the campground making their barbecues, and life goes on until they get evacuated, because we do understand that will be happening very shortly, Dan. So all the emergency crews still in the response mode out here.
Well, we will check back in with you here shortly. I want to bring in Chief Meteorologist Dave Hovde right now. Dave, you were talking about the currents before and about the winds. It's a very to go now to Jeanette Trumpeter, who is there live to give us a look at exactly what that appears to be on the beach there. Jeanette, big stretch of oil behind you, looks like.
Yeah, it's a beautiful evening to be at Refugio State Beach, but not tonight, and this is why. Look at the crude that has spilled offshore, actually. We're used to seeing oil spills start in the ocean and then head inland, but this one actually started on land and was an open spill for about 3 hours. The spill, we're told, started just before noon. Boy, this is slippery and slick stuff here along the beach, not something you'd want to be playing around in any way. The spill started shortly before noon, spilled about 7,000 gallons an hour from a pipeline onshore, and then leaked out into the ocean. It was spilling for about 3 hours, so they estimate about 21,000 gallons onto the beaches and onto the ocean. And again, we're at Gaviota State Beach, and the area where the pipeline burst and spilled this crude is just to the north of us, just around the cove. We can see containment boats here putting out the containment booms, trying to stop this. Earlier when we first got here, just where you see, I don't know, Kenny Nichols, you're kind of showing the ocean, but if you see the little blue boat at the end of the containment boom, that is about where the spill ends out in the ocean, about 50 yards out. And right where that boat was, we saw a couple of humpbacks playing just outside the oil spill. So certainly that was a concern for them before they put out those booms. And it did appear that blue boat was kind of trying to chase the wildlife, the marine wildlife, away. Lily Tan is real familiar with where these oil pipelines lead and come from, obviously offshore and the offshore pipelines. But fill us in on where this crude actually came from.
Thanks, Jeanette. Well, this crude did not come from those offshore platforms that you see way up.
Welcome back. We are live in Gaviota covering the oil spill that happened sometime just before noon today. Crews still responding and trying to get some containment here at Gaviota Beach, where, as you can see, it is covered with thick black crude. And if we look out into the waves a bit, we're seeing that there is plenty in the water. And what crews are doing right now is trying to figure out how bad this spill is. First order of business. B, contain it as best they can. What we are not seeing right now is any containment booms out there, so they're still in the process of all that. Big question, what will the tides, what will the weather do? So we want to get right back to Chief Meteorologist Dave Hovde for the latest on the Mother Nature's help with cleaning this thing up, Dave. So now the tide comes back in, we do have to worry about the creek beds and some of the water inlets heading inland. You know, Kenny, I just got to look at this. You can see why they're concerned about the effects of this on any marine wildlife. It is just sticky, and once you have it on you, it's pretty tough to get on. I've kind of gone around the rocks and tried to scrape some of this off, and even with that. So I imagine this will be full of bulldozers in the next couple days, Dan, as they try to clean up the beach and then contain it from getting too far out to sea. But a lot of that depends on Mother Nature and what the tides and the winds and everything else does.
Jeanette, we were just looking at some aerial views. There was one of the boats offshore there that was pulling a boom in a sort of big circular movement, looked like offshore. Can you get a sense of how much equipment they have out there trying to wrap up all of this spill?
Yeah, you know, Dan, at one point we had 5 boats out here. I believe Clean Seas has 2. And what happens during a spill like this is some of the companies that work out on the pipelines are required to have those containment booms on their boats. So when a spill like this happens, everyone responds. The oil companies, the contractors out on those platforms, Clean Seas, the Coast Guard. So the immediate response was massive, and everybody was here. Some of those boats have been pulled back, which we would hope is evidence of some sort of good sign that they think this will be a fairly quick containment. So at this point, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boats, and I believe that blue boat is mostly towing the containment lines out and also trying to chase away any wildlife that might be near shore.
Well, that's certainly a big concern. You mentioned the whales just offshore out there, and this is the time of the year when they're
migrating season.
Exactly. They are migrating with their calves, and right now with Jeanette, and find out. Jeanette, what's the latest from where you are? It looks like you're at one of the campground areas there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there were a lot of people here to enjoy this beautiful day, and unfortunately the spill is changing their plans. Most campers that we saw kind of hunkered down and said we're staying anyway, even though it is smelly here, and obviously you can't enjoy the beach. But now they are being told that it is a mandatory evacuation. They need to pack up and go. And if you spend a little time here, you can see why there are some concerns. The smell is like standing around your gas can or your gas tank when you're immediately filling it and having that strong stench kind of come to you. Rayanne Christensen has been talking to some of the campers. Did you guys actually get your evacuation order yet?
Yeah, we did.
A half hour ago, we're packing up and headed out.
So where are you from?
I'm from Boston, but I live in Long Beach right now, Long Beach, California.
So this was an interrupt in your vacation?
Yeah, I took the week off and made a day of it, I guess.
So you just got here when?
Last night.
It was just an hour ago. It was just
Of
beautiful
the
out.
water just a couple hours ago. He was catching the fish right off,
Oh, wow.
right off there.
Can we zero in on that, Kenny Nichols? So enjoying a nice fishing, beautiful day.
It was gorgeous out here. It's too bad.
So what now?
Probably home, back to Long Beach. This ruined the trip.
Aw, well, we're sorry about that, but we're glad that you're taking precautions for your health, and hope you'll come back and visit us when it's beautiful again.
Thank you so much. I will.
What's
I
your
will.
name?
I'm John Kane.
John Kane?
Bryson Kane.
All right, Bryson, have a safe trip.
All right.
Okay, so yeah, campers, that's a concern. We have Charlie Misra, who's also been talking to people who live in the area, and they're concerned even for people beyond the campground.
That's right, Jeanette. We talked to a couple that just lives probably about a mile away from here, and they were saying they live and work there, and the stench up near where they live was even worse than it is here. They say that the wind carried it over into the canyon where it's kind of a little pocket of it's kind of like a little
Still
pocket
air.
of stench. Exactly. So we'll hear from them right now. Right here we have this nice breeze, and the smell is getting a little bit better as the time goes on, but out there you could understand how it goes straight right into the canyon there, and it can be difficult for them.
Just like it's a lot hotter in those canyons, so is the stench right now. So Dan, yeah, a few health concerns for the humans here and obviously the wildlife, and a lot of cleanup to be done tonight. Like you said, they're not even on the beach yet. I think what they're focusing on now is the creeks, so that the water doesn't come back into those waterways, and then the water off our coastline.
All right. Thank you, Jeanette. And as Dave mentioned earlier,
I'm Jeanette Trumpeter, live at Refugio State Beach, where it is a beautiful evening to be, but we have a big mess here. The crude that has spilled on this beach and 4 miles wide along the Pacific. Sticky, ugly mess that they are now trying to get some containment of as it heads out into the Pacific and as the tide moves in, because what we have now is sand that can be bulldozed. Soon as this makes it to these rocks, it gets a little more complicated to clean up when all these rocks are covered with crude. We have a spill that started shortly before noon. About 21,000 gallons is the latest estimate of crude that spilled out into the Pacific and along the coastline. They turned it off after 3 hours and have stopped the spill, so now it's cleanup and containment. Dan, we have a long night ahead of us, it sounds like.
all right. Well, we appreciate the view from the beach there. Thank you, Jeanette. We're going to speak with. We have more.
We're live at Refugio State Beach, and where more than the tide is coming in, a lot of oily gook from this spill. There's an oily sheen to the water and there is a smell in the air. Charlie Misra, you've been talking to people in the neighborhood. They want them to be careful.
Right, Jeanette. They don't want anyone near the beach. If you take in this air, you could get a headache or you could get nauseous.
All right, and Rayanne has been worrying about the wildlife and the effects on that?
Yes, we actually have crews that have been combing the beach tonight already. They are looking for those animals and taking care of them. Do not touch them if you do come in contact with one.
Campgrounds have been evacuated, so Memorial Day plans being changed for a lot of folks. And Lily, you've been looking into the history of the company with the break.
I am. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, Plains All-American Pipeline Company has a history of violations, more than 10 spills in other states like Texas, Louisiana, and even a spill in Los Angeles last year.
So we will have team coverage tonight on our late news. We have all of our crews working this story tonight. But right now, we are just waiting for the tide to come in, and the crews are hoping to beat this before it reaches the rocks. And it's hard to see with our cameras, but if you look out as the waves come in, there is an oily sheen to every wave. What we do have is calm seas, and the crews that are trying to get this contained say that is good news for them. It makes their jobs a lot easier. So as the big clumps of oil come inland, there's still oil in the water, and unfortunately, we have a spill on the Central Coast, and now it's just how quickly it can be cleaned up. But look at what's coming ashore, Dan.
All right.
Again, we have crews on the beach taking care of the beach. That hopefully will happen before nightfall. It makes their job a lot harder as they get going into the darkness. We have people still assessing the damage from the air and from the water. And then down the beach, you see people gathering to try to prevent any high tide seepage into our waterways, into the creeks, and into the rivers that feed out into the Pacific. So team coverage down for you. We will be here all evening long and bring you the latest on our news at 10 and 11, of course.
All right. Jeanette, Rayanne, of course, Charlie, and Lily, great job out there.
Yeah.
We have a team that is on scene now, and Jeanette Trumpeter is out there live. Jeanette, tell us about the latest here. You were talking earlier about the tide coming in. Have you been able to detect whether the water is beginning to move up the shore there?
It is slowly, Dan. I think we haven't seen a whole lot of movement, but what we've seen is some of this crude kind of just settling, finding its place on the beach, thickening up a little bit. See how it's getting a little sticky. This is not what we want on any of our marine mammals' bodies or any of our marine life anywhere. And the problem we have now is as the tide comes in, first of all, you can see the boats out there putting up the containment booms, keeping this onshore leak from getting too far offshore. But as the tide comes in, we have all these rocks and things. That makes the cleanup a little more difficult tonight and tomorrow once it's reached these rocks. Now, what we have seen just within the last 5 or 10 minutes since the last time I talked to you is crews gathering up the beach, getting ready to come and do some of the cleanup. We have Rayanne Christensen up there, Lily Tan's here. We have team coverage, Charlie Misra talking to the campers who are being evacuated. They do not want people on this beach. They want it clear so they can begin the cleanup, and then all these people who came and tried to get that extra day vacation and have a long week being kicked out of the campground. So it's really messing with some people's vacation plans. Lily Tan, we know this oil originally came from offshore the rigs, but it is piped in, goes to a storage facility. And explain how this leak happened.
It does. It has quite the journey, Jeanette. As you said,
All right, thank you, Lily. And Dan, we're here, as I mentioned, Charlie Misra talking to some of the neighbors who are being affected by this. And we also have Rayanne Christensen talking to the campers. So we're going to toss things back to you and find out how Mother Nature will cooperate with these cleanup efforts. But we'll be back with you in a few minutes.
All right. Jeanette, thank you very much. From Cape Town, South Africa, is quickly becoming a viral sensation after a video has come out on YouTube. And basically in this video, he is doing animal sound impressions. Kind of wild. Take a listen.
It reminds me of those toys I had when I was little where you'd like turn it and then pull the string and it would...
And your parents are like, will you quit doing that,
Yeah.
please? Will you stop it, please? You're making me crazy. But
The
this
man
just goes
making
on and
these
on.
noises is William Jafta. He makes a full-time living street performing. This video of him was posted on YouTube yesterday. It already has close to 1 million views. He's featured making all kinds of animal noises. So if you haven't had enough yet, you can visit ksby.com.
He just needs to get a job doing voiceover. He would make a fortune doing it.
Why did he need 2 pencils? Well, that was
I
the
think it
that
just
was the
Must be
first
for
thing.
one of
In case
his...
one breaks.
Okay. Like mechanical
Right.
pencil would be my guess.
You want it to look as interesting as
Gotta
it
have that
sounds.
second
Just,
one.
I hate to derail this cross
Matt, can I
topic, but
hear
that
some
was
of those noises?
the first thing that I thought about when I
Good
saw
night.
that.
Well, a street performer from Cape Town, South Africa, quickly becoming a viral sensation after a video has come out on YouTube showing him doing some animal sound impressions. Check it out. See what you think.
Now, the man making these noises is William Jafta. He makes a full-time living street performing. This video of him was posted on YouTube yesterday and already has close to 1 million views. He's featured making all kinds of animal sounds. If you'd like to hear the whole spiel, visit ksby.com. Ken replaces those toys that you had
What
when
is
you
he
were
doing
little.
right there?
I'm
with
trying
the-
to figure out what some of these are.
Oh, well,
Do you need some help? The doggy goes.
quack, quack goes
The cat goes.
Well,
There was one that was just
Toys in my house for my 3-year-old that might help you out if you're interested.
yeah, we would bring those in.
didn't grow up with old
Those will be
McDonald's,
instructive.
apparently.
Take care. Good night.